Hello and welcome back to Hardy's Books. Now it is December and you know what that means. Time for our top 10 books that we read in 2024 combined edition.
Yes, that doesn't mean books that came out in 2024.
Nope.
In fact, very few of these came out in 2024.
No. Some of them did.
Some of them did, but not all.
Not all. So the way that we did this, because Laura and I have not read necessarily all the same books,
No.
so we couldn't really make a top 10 in a conventional way. What we had to do was we went through all the books we enjoyed,
Yes.
allocated them points,
Yes.
and then created some kind of
Yes. So there is
table.
method to this madness.
yes. But there's definitely also a clear winner.
Yeah.
And you also might be wondering, why are we doing this video at the start of December? There's still a whole month ahead. And that's because Laura's busy running a bookshop.
Yeah.
And I'm busy reading Oathbringer.
Yes.
Which I think will probably take me up to the end of the year.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
you know, I think that says it all.
Yeah, we're busy. Busy bees.
Busy, so fitting it in while we can. Let's get some honourable mentions out of the way.
Okay.
What these books are. Fooled ya! You thought these were the top 10. No! All right, Laura, do you want to start?
Okay, so earlier this year, I read The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I really enjoyed this. I'm not sure what year this came out in. A long time ago, I think. I think this was like the first book that R.F. Kuang published. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I know it divides opinions. But I thoroughly enjoyed this. There were parts of the beginning of this story that I didn't enjoy. I didn't love the kind of YA feeling at the beginning, but when it kicks off, it kicks off.
Soon dispenses with that nonsense.
Yeah, and from there on out, it is fantastic. So yeah, comes highly recommended from me. Brilliant honourable mention.
Didn't make your top 10 though.
No.
I'd like to recommend Rogba Payne's The Dance of Shadows,
Yep.
which, I mean, we love Rogba. This is a fantastic book. It only didn't score in the top 10 because Laura hasn't read it. So I thought this was so brilliant, epic African fantasy with like hints of like a Malazan-esque scale going on behind the scenes. Like I thought that there was just some, it was just brilliant world building, highly recommended, and written by the loveliest guy in the world.
Yeah, we love Rogba.
And his second book is coming out 2025.
Yeah. Another one to mention is A Sample of Wild Bill. The only reason this isn't in our top 10 is because I actually read it last year.
Yes.
Ross read it this year.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. So good.
Yeah.
We're both of us loving the Monk and Robot series by Becky Chambers.
Love that optimism.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Fantastic. Can't get enough.
Great characters as well.
Yeah.
Like,
So that's another honourable mention.
we love it. I'd like to shout out The Tainted Cup. This here is a lovely Inkstone edition. We have a lovely relationship with Inkstone Books. We are the only bricks and mortar bookshop in the UK to be selling Inkstone books because we love them and then we think they do special editions really well.
Yeah.
They didn't pay us to say that.
No.
Just love them.
Yeah.
And The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett is a fantasy mystery with kind of some kind of Lovecraftian bits in there as well.
Yeah.
It is wonderful. It is brilliant. It is gory and weird, and also quite funny.
All the good things.
All the good things.
And also, look at this edition. It's got these beautiful sprayed edges.
Look at those. A Drop of Corruption, the second book in the series, is probably one of my most anticipated books of next year,
Love
alongside
it.
Sun
Love
Eater.
it.
But we'll get into Sun Eater later.
I would also like to shout out
Be careful.
The Hunger of the Gods. Spoiler alert, we're talking about Shadow of the Gods later. Hunger of the Gods is the second in the Bloodsworn saga and is amazing, brilliant. I have Fury of the Gods on my TBR. It just recently came out. The only reason I haven't got to it yet is, as we mentioned, I've been very busy lately. But yeah, I love John Gwyn's writing. I love the Bloodsworn saga. Yeah.
Top bloke.
Top, tippity top.
Between Two Fires, up until about the last quarter of this book, it was on track to be my book of the year. The end was a bit weird, but but I loved most of it. It is a brilliant book as a kind of medieval folk horror in like plague years in France, but it's not just the plague that's the horrible thing. There's also demons and angels running around, which is good fun. Amazing book. I've never read anything like it, and I'd like to read more things like it.
My last honourable mention is Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. We did a whole book club episode on this. This is a really beautiful edition with the pink edges. It's fantastic. If you haven't read The Expanse yet, I highly recommend it. There's also an amazing series of The Expanse.
The TV show rocks.
It's so good.
It's so good.
It's so good. Yeah, fantastic. I won't dwell on it because I'm aware that this is going to be a long video otherwise.
Yes.
But yeah.
2 final honourable mentions from me. The Historian. I read this at the start of the year in response to trying to read Empire of the Vampire, which I did not enjoy.
No.
But then I was still craving vampires, so I asked on Discord for people to recommend me a vampire book, and thank you to Belemris for recommending me The Historian, because this was just exactly what I was craving. It's like a secret history Dracula book, but like also like a Euro trip. And it's epistolary, sort of, in the old Dracula style. Not quite epistolary, but it's kind of, first person account. And I thought it was fantastic. And if you have read this book and you'd like a book that's similar to read, can I also recommend The Black Hunger, which has very similar vibes, and I read it this year. Didn't quite make the honourable mentions, but it was a fantastic book. And the last, I'm reaching. And the last book on our honourable mentions is Kingdoms of Death, which was in our half-year recap video, wasn't it?
Yeah.
4th book from the Sunita sequence, and wherein Hadrian Marlowe has a very bad time.
Yeah.
It is crushing, but it is brilliant. So, highly recommend getting on with the Sunny sequence. If you haven't started...
What are you doing?
All right, Laura.
Okay, so our top 10. Should we go from... Where should we start?
At number 10?
Okay, so we're going in hot.
Just the way that this has worked out, you're going to hear my voice for a little bit more, because I got the next 3 in his list. So.
Well, hang on. I'm also reading number 10.
Okay, fine. You're also reading number 10. We talked about this, I think hinted at it in a previous video.
Yeah.
We were very, very, very fortunate that we made friends with Gollancz this year.
Yeah.
And we were given an advanced reading copy of The Devils by Joe Abercrombie.
Yeah, we did.
We have to thank the team from Gollancz so much.
Yeah.
Jenna,
Bethan,
just lovely, lovely folks, and we were so grateful that they thought these folks need a coffee. And
do you know why it is though? It's because I've been fangirling over Joe Abercrombie at Gollancz events for years now, and they know I have no chill.
Yeah.
I turned up to meet Joe Abercrombie with flowers. You can go back and watch the Gollancz Fest video.
Oh, yeah. Let's get back to the books rather than focusing on how much we love the man, whom we love. The Devils is the first book in a new series which is not set in the world of the First Law. It is set in a parallel kind of timeline wherein Carthage beat Rome in the Punic Wars, and things diverged, but also magic appeared somewhere. So rather than having the Roman Empire, you had the Carthaginian Empire, and that just changed everything. I mean, there are lots of familiar places, lots of familiar-esque kind of bits of history. You have elves for some reason. Yeah. The elves are there, vampires exist, and all these kind of things. And it slaps. So this is Joe Abercrombie's Suicide Squad book.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It is brilliant. The characters are fantastic. My favourite character, because I finished it, Laura's still working on it. Yeah. She's busy.
But I'm loving it.
Yes.
I can't overstate how much I love Joe Abercrombie.
He's come up with some incredible characters, like Balthazar Shamir is like the best, one of his best characters ever. The first third of it is perhaps not as tight as we come to expect from the First Law, just because new world, new things to explore. So that's why it's at number 10 on this list. Yeah.
But the continuation of this series is going to be
incredible.
Oh my god!
I would say the second 50% is Joe Abercrombie peak. Yeah. The funniest he's ever been, and the most Joe Abercrombie he's ever been as well. So, look forward to The Devils when it releases in May 2025. Yeah. And this is not the last Joe Abercrombie you'll see on this top 10 list. No. So that we are respectful of your time. Number 9. This is a book that only I read this year, which is A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter M. Miller. I was inspired to read by reading Sunita because this is one of Christopher Rocchio's inspiration books, and I can see why. It is a future kind of post-apocalypse sci-fi that deals with the loss of knowledge and the loss of kind of civilization, and then the efforts of these monks to try to retain that information and try to learn from it. And we're told this through kind of 3 kind of short stories, kind of like over the, from different kind of points in this future history. The end is brilliant and also heavily depressing. I just loved it, and yes, because Laura hasn't read it, I won't say anything else about it, except if you like your futuristic, heady sci-fi, definitely check out A Canticle for Leibowitz. One more from me. I read Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Now, I read this because when we interviewed Joanne Harris, this was one of the books that came up on her Books That Made Me, and I can absolutely see why. This is an extraordinary book. It's very short, so you can read it in, 2 sittings maybe. Let's put it this way, it is like the origin story for a haunted house. And it's told from the perspective of a young girl called Mary Cat, who has been surrounded by a strange family circumstance in which many members of her family died mysteriously. This story kind of follows Mary Cat as she basically experiences OCD and her ways of coping with the weird circumstances around her family, the support of her sister Constance, and then the arrival of another mysterious member of the family. It is a brilliant book, so well written, instant classic, had to go straight to my top 10, fiction books of all time. This is extraordinary. Highly recommend it. Laura?
Yes?
Your turn to talk about a few books.
Okay, so next up, we already spoke about Psalm for the World Built in our Honourable Mentions, but because I read that last year, we can't talk about it in our top 10. We did read this year the follow-up to that, which is a Prayer for the Crown Shy, which is the second in the Monk and Robot duology. I do think that Psalm for the Wild Built is the stronger of the 2.
I would agree with that.
But unfortunately, I read it last year, not this year. But I did read this year.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Monk and Robot just generally.
It's such an antidote to the world right now.
It's just so wonderful. We did a whole video on why we love it.
You can click that.
Clickety click click. Without giving too much away, if you haven't read A Psalm for the Wild Built, Psalm for the Wild Built follows Dex, the main character, as they travel out of the populated human zone into the wilderness, and this one follows Dex as they return from the wilderness, accompanied by Moscat the robot, back to the populated areas of the world. They live on Panga, which is a moon. It's set in the distant future, but it's set basically after civilization has collapsed, the machine age has ended, and humans have had to rebuild from the ground up, and they're thriving. And it's what they call hope punk. It's just it's so wonderful to think that we might be forced to build a better future, but it is possible.
It does the bold work of imagining different ways of building society, and I love books that do that in an optimistic way.
Yeah, it's just such a lovely little series, both this and A Psalm for the Wild Built. I think cozy is thrown around too much. I think it does it a disservice to just whack the label cozy on it. It's much more than just a cozy.
Yeah.
It's got much more substance than just cozy.
It's a very reassuring read, isn't
it?
Coming at you with the whole cliched YouTube cutting in with the handheld camera thing. I've just been reading Opacities by Sophia Samatar. The first line of the book really feels like it encapsulates what Monk and Robot does. So from Opacities, it is, the dream is to create a book that will also be a tonic, not a course of study, but a course of treatment. That is what Monk and Robot is all about. And I love that. And more Sophia Samatar later.
Now for something completely different, folks.
We've spoken about Sun Eater already. In our number 6 spot
is Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio. I read this at the very beginning of the year. I think it was January. And it's just superb. Just superb. This follows our protagonist, Hadrian Marlowe, as he I'm not going to give spoilers.
He basically, this is Hadrian Marlowe's origin story.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's just great. It's the start of a really epic tale.
I know Sam Harrison's going to give us grief about that. Because this book itself isn't as epic as it then grows to be.
Yeah, the scale of this book is quite small. It stays within 1 or 2 places. And you're focusing on 1 or 2 characters. But I love that. I love getting to know a character really intimately and, you know, growing with them and knowing them inside out, which is what is so magical about books like this. But then the scale of the series is it just gets greater and greater and greater. And the layers of world building and character growth become more and more evident. And I think that's just what's so wonderful about Sun Eater in general and Empire of Silence in particular. It's fantastic.
I mean, we have to thank, what was it, Mike's book reviews on YouTube for kind of pulling these books out of obscurity.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm so glad that Christopher Rocchio is finally getting to get the attention that he deserves as a writer.
Absolutely, completely. And it does make me slightly upset that he's younger than me.
He's a baby.
I'm so old.
Little child. What was the thing we said the other day?
So I said to Ross, I was like, if I died and you met a new partner and then you and your new partner also died, would you want to be buried next to me or to the new partner? And Ross went, what? And I went, if I died tragically young, I mean. And Ross didn't miss a beat. He just went, Laura, you're already older than tragically young.
One of my more savage moments. I had to take it.
It was low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
I left myself open. Right, moving on. We already mentioned Bloodsworn, the Shadow of the Gods, the first of the Bloodsworn saga.
Well, you read this in January as well, didn't you?
I did. I had a banging
strong
January. I did.
My gosh.
Oh, coming in hot.
Yeah.
This is absolutely incredible. As opening books for trilogies go, this really does come in hot. You don't know what's coming. Wow, John Gwynne can really write.
I would say, as a cover of a book, it really does set the tone. It's like, here's this extremely large dragon and a very little tiny person. It's like, this book is going to be very, very big.
It's incredible. I've said it before in my Shadow of the Gods review, which, again, linky. John Gwynne can really write a fight scene.
Oh, yeah.
He writes a fight scene in a way that you feel like you're there.
Doesn't he do like battle reenactments and things?
Yeah, he does. You feel like you have got like sweat trickling down your back. Like you can feel like the armor on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. You're really in it.
Yeah.
You're like, oh man, I'm tired. I'm like at the oar, like, oh god.
This is good. Yeah, people like when they're writing like battle scenes, who's the worst culprit for it? Is Brandon Sanderson. But that's mainly because like he's just like, oh, I'm gonna make my character wield a sword that doesn't have any weight.
And it's gonna be taller than he is.
Just so I don't have to think about how much it's gonna hurt his arm. John Gwynne's like, nope, this axe is gonna weigh more than his head.
If you like gritty, gory battle scenes, my god, Bloodsworn. Woof.
On this list, this was, if you recall from the halfway video, if you watched it, my #1 book of the year, which is Howling Dark, the second book from the Sun Eater sequence. I just think that what it did after Empire of Silence is it just took this kind of launch pad and then was like, have a universe, have at.
So what we were saying about Empire of Silence being quite sort of small and you get to know the characters and it's all very, you really get into the nitty-gritty of who is Hadrian, what is this world about. Then Howling Dark is like...
Yeah, Howling Dark blows it all up.
Yeah.
It, again, follows in the footsteps of all those kind of philosophical sci-fi writers that I love and isn't afraid to go there in the context of a book that's like Star Wars. It's like if Obi-Wan went to some kind of monastic retreat and then communicated with his higher self for a little bit and then came back down and then this is brilliant. And the fact that he had the guts to just go, let's go full philosophy, you know, in the second book of Space Epic. I am so glad that this book has seen the light of day and that we get to read it. It is still my favourite from the 5 of the 6 released Sunny's books that I've read. Everyone tells me that Disquiet Gods is like this again, which makes me extremely excited to read it. I've just been pacing myself because, you know, we're not going to get Shadows Upon Time until like December next year. So I've got to like, you know, I've got to imbibe, I got to microdose my Sun Eater, you know, just pace myself a little bit. But anyway, I've spoken about this book before. You can go see our review. It is fantastic.
They've got a big one coming up now.
Yes. So
in the literal and the metaphorical sense.
This was my book of last year.
And it's up there in my book of this year.
Yes. Jonathan Strange.
Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. What can I say? This book took over my life for about 2 months. It's extraordinary. It is written almost as a pastiche of 18th century literature. It is a work of art.
Yeah.
It's a masterpiece. I think it's one of the most consequential works of fantasy to come out in the last 100 years. It behooves you to give it a go if you haven't already. No, it's not got swords and dragons and all of that. It's much more subtle and it's much more nuanced. It's not for everyone, but if it is for you, it is going to be extremely for you. It is extraordinary. We did a whole series about it that we'll link to below.
Like, this is my favourite book. This is actually my favourite book. And you know how much relief I felt when Laura actually enjoyed it? I was like, oh, thank goodness. But because I did read it this year, but because I didn't read it this year for the first time, it's only in 3rd spot because I couldn't award it any points.
Yeah, the same with Psalm for the Wild Bill. I did read it this year, but not for the first time.
So if you might think, how is this in 3rd spot? It's just our weird scoring system. We actually then got the chance to meet Susanna Clarke, which is just incredible, and that you can see our copy here is signed to us. She is so lovely, she is wonderful, and I love this book.
So we're on to one that we have both read this year.
Surprise entry at number 2.
Yeah, so this is one you might not have heard of. I think you should have done, because it's absolutely amazing, and it's a very little book called The Practice, the Horizon and the Chain by Sophia Samatar, and it's incredible.
This just came out of left field. Like we went with our friend Sam Harrison to Oxford and then popped into Blackwell's Oxford, and we chatted to the manager there, who was a really, really lovely guy, and he gave us 3 recommendations of books that we needed to read.
I'm Dan, I'm the manager at Blackwell's Sci-Fi Manga, and I was asked 3 sci-fi books that I loved.
One of them was Orbital.
Yes.
The other one was a book called Blue Lard by
weird.
Vladimir Sorokin. Very weird book. And the 3rd book that he recommended was this one.
The Practice, the Horizon and the Change. Just read it. Read it now. Go and buy it.
And it's absolutely out of this world amazing.
It's very short. It's readable in a single session.
Yeah.
That single session will be very, very impactful.
I just read it in one sitting. It's absolutely incredible.
I think that for me, the theme that really stuck out about this book, and what made me also want to write this theme into a book as well, is the kind of willful kind of ignorance that the upper tiers of society kind of go through, ignoring the plight of the lower tiers of their society. And this kind of like the way that they're just blind themselves to the suffering.
Yeah.
And it really deeply explores that idea. I think it's an incredible little allegory, and one that will stay with you for a very, very long time.
It's extraordinary. It explores all these really, really poignant themes about class. It's so beautifully done, beautifully written, poignant. I really wish everyone that had gone and bought Orbital, which is also a great book and beautifully written.
Yeah.
But I wish that everyone that had read Orbital would also go and read this, because I just think it's criminally underrated.
I'm very excited to read her book Opacities, which is a book about her writing.
Yeah.
So very meta. I've got my copy and I'm
going to borrow it.
Yeah.
And our final number one book of this year that we both read.
Still number one.
Yeah.
It's A Little Hatred.
Yeah.
We told you Joe Abercrombie was coming back, and he did. And let me say, this is one of the best books I've ever read.
It's so good. It's so funny. It's so well paced. It's so well written. It's so Joe Abercrombie. Yeah. It's just extraordinary.
It's like he looked at the first law, was like, that's my masterpiece, and then thought, I could do better than that.
How can I make this more Ross and Laura?
Yeah. It is like, I don't know how you come up with, like, dare I say, better characters than the cast of the first law. I mean, a lot of them return.
Yeah.
But it's like you have your two, your class of the first law, and you get the class of Age of Madness sequence. And it's like how are they at least as good, if not potentially better than that? It's so full of brilliant characters, incredibly high stakes once again. But also going into the Industrial Revolution theme and seeing something different in this world, but seeing our familiar characters react to it. I love a book with a revolution.
Yeah. And I love a proper, nuanced, complex, interesting female lead.
Savine.
Oh, my queen.
The fact that there's literally a chapter where she has period pains.
Oh.
It's like, Joe Abercrombie's met a woman.
Yeah, he's met a real human woman. He knows what period pains must be like. A standing ovation from the two of us in our living room.
How did it take so long to read a fantasy book that acknowledges that periods exist without calling them her moon sequence? I'm a big fan as well of Gunnar Braun.
I
think
him.
He's a brilliant character. The way he takes his glasses off and folds them. Oh.
Incredible.
Oh. This is one of those ones that, like, it was so good that neither of us have continued this series yet, because we're like,
I don't want to ruin it.
We want to give it space. It's like, you can't, you have to factor it into your year.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, right, so everything else that I'm going to read this year is going to have to be read after reading that.
Yeah, basically. That's our book of the year.
Yeah,
2024. It didn't come out in 2024. It came out in
2019,
but still absolutely slaps. Joe Abercrombie, we bow down to you, and I know you're loving it because we know what you're like. 10 out of 10, no notes.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you for joining us for our top 10.
That was chaos.
It was, as always. You must have missed it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what are we going to do next week? Something, I don't know. Tell us are you enjoying the bookshop content?
We don't want Hardy's Books to become the bookshop channel.
No.
Because that's not what most of you signed up for.
No.
If you do want to follow along with the bookshop, I'm very active on Instagram at Station Books Tunbridge Wells. Otherwise, we're going to try and keep this as it was.
Yeah.
I.e. us two talking about sci-fi and fantasy.
With maybe a bit of bookshop-ish influences in there as well.
But yeah, don't worry, this isn't about to become the bookshop channel.
But speaking of bookshop, you should go to bookshop.org.
Yes.
And then nominate Station Books.
Yes.
This is if you're based in the UK. If you nominate Station Books, then you can, whenever you buy a book through bookshop.org, we get 30% of that sale, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And likewise, if you go to Libro FM for your audiobooks, and this is global, you can also support us on there.
Yes.
And we are, please do that.
We'll be very, very appreciative.
Very appreciative.
Find us on Instagram at Hardy's Books for just this nonsense, or at Station Books Tunbridge Wells for the bookshop. Hit like if you've enjoyed this video, subscribe for more chaos like this, and we will see you next week.